The most dangerous bureaucrat in history, fainted at the sight of blood, and yet Heinrich Himmler, more than almost any other individual in the 20th century, was responsible for the organized murder of millions of human beings. He didn't pull a single trigger himself. He didn't need to. He built the machine. What makes Himmler so disturbing, so genuinely terrifying to study, is not that he was a monster in the way we imagine monsters. He was methodical, bureaucratic. He kept detailed records. He followed schedules. He cared deeply about racial purity paperwork. He was, by most accounts, a boring man, a pedantic, obsessive, socially awkward man who happened to become the second most powerful person in Nazi Germany and the chief architect of the Holocaust. This is the story of how that happened. A middle-class boy with big dreams and no combat record. Munich, 1900. Heinrich Himmler is born into a conservative Catholic middle-class family. His father is a school teacher with connections to the Bavarian royal family, connections he used to get his son accepted as an officer candidate during World War I. This was Heinrich's great dream, to serve on the front, to win glory, to come home a decorated soldier like his brother Gebhard, who earned the Iron Cross on the Western Front. It never happened. On November 11th, 1918, while Himmler was still in training, Germany signed the armistice. The war ended. He never fired a shot in anger. He never saw a battlefield, and this failure haunted him. The young Himmler compensated in other ways. He studied agriculture at the Technical University in Munich. He joined a nationalist student fraternity. He began reading voraciously, not novels, not philosophy in any meaningful sense, but anti-Semitic pamphlets, Germanic mythology, occult literature, and racial theory. His diary from this period reveals a young man constructing a worldview brick by brick, each book reinforcing the last, each pamphlet pushing him further toward a radical, race-obsessed nationalism. By the time he graduated in 1922, he was already a fanatical Völkisch nationalist. The question was just what to do with it. The beer hall putsch and the beginning of everything. Himmler found his answer through Ernst Röhm, a decorated veteran, an early Nazi and co-founder of the SA. Röhm was everything Himmler wished he could be, a combat soldier, a man of action, a man with scars. Himmler admired him enormously and joined his nationalist paramilitary group. Through Röhm, Himmler made contact with the National Socialist movement. On August 1st, 1923, he joined the Nazi Party. 3 months later, on November 9th, he marched alongside Hitler, Röhm, and Hermann Göring in the beer hall putsch, an attempt to seize power in Munich that collapsed almost immediately. It failed spectacularly. Hitler was arrested. The party was in chaos. For most, this was a catastrophe. For Himmler, it was an opportunity. While the Nazi leadership was imprisoned or disgraced, Himmler remained free. He was questioned but never charged, and he went to work for Gregor Strasser, the Nazi Party's propaganda chief. He traveled across Bavaria, giving speeches, distributing leaflets, building the party's grassroots infrastructure. He was not glamorous, he was not charismatic, but he was extraordinarily organized, deeply disciplined, and utterly tireless. He was also Catholic, or had been. In the years following the putsch, Himmler quietly abandoned Christianity and replaced it with something far stranger, a personal religion built from Germanic mythology, occult mysticism, and racial ideology. The SS, he would later envision, was not just a military unit, it was a new order of knights, a brotherhood of racially pure warriors, a Teutonic religion with Himmler as its high priest. Building the SS, from 290 men to a state within a state. In January 1929, Hitler appointed Himmler Reichsführer SS. At that moment, the SS had 290 members. Its function was essentially to sell Nazi newspapers and act as bodyguards for party leaders. Himmler saw something else entirely. Within 4 years, by the time the Nazis seized power in January 1933, the SS had grown to over 52,000 members. Himmler had transformed it from a minor party unit into an ideological elite, with strict membership requirements that would have excluded Himmler himself had anyone pointed out that he didn't quite match his own Nordic ideal. Every SS recruit was vetted for racial purity. Family trees had to be traced back to 1800, proving Aryan ancestry. SS men who wished to marry had to submit both their own and their prospective wife's genealogy for approval. Each man was issued a Sippenbook, a detailed genetic record. Himmler expected each SS marriage to produce at least 4 children. The program largely failed. Fewer than 40% of SS men married within the program, and each produced roughly 1 child. But that was never really the point. The point was to create a culture of racial obsession, to make men feel they belonged to something ancient and superior, and it worked. Taking control of Germany's terror apparatus. Between 1933 and 1936, Himmler executed one of the most remarkable power grabs in modern political history, quietly, methodically, and almost entirely through bureaucratic maneuvering. It began in March 1933, weeks after Hitler became Chancellor, when Himmler was appointed head of the Munich police. He immediately handed the political police division to his deputy, Reinhard Heydrich, a man of cold, razor-sharp intelligence whom Himmler had recruited in 1931 and who would become his most important instrument. Together, they began moving through Germany's states one by one, seizing control of each political police force. By 1934, the only holdout was Prussia, controlled by Hermann Göring, who had created the Gestapo. Göring, realizing he needed someone more ruthless to run it, handed it to Himmler on April 20th, 1934. Within 2 days, Heydrich was named its chief. Then came the Night of the Long Knives. By mid-1934, Ernst Röhm, Himmler's old patron and the man who had first introduced him to the Nazi movement, had become a political liability. Röhm commanded 3 million SA men and was lobbying Hitler to make the SA the primary armed force of Germany, absorbing the regular army. The army generals were furious. Hitler was concerned, and Himmler and Göring fed Hitler intelligence, some fabricated, suggesting Röhm was planning a coup. On the night of June 30th, 1934, Hitler acted. The SS moved against the SA leadership in coordinated strikes across Germany. Röhm was arrested, given the choice between suicide and execution, refused to kill himself, and was shot by 2 SS officers. Between 85 and 200 SA leaders and political enemies were killed over the following 2 days. Gregor Strasser, the man who had given Himmler his first real job in politics, was among them. The reward was enormous. On July 20th, 1934, Hitler declared the SS an independent organization answerable only to himself. Himmler's title of Reichsführer SS became equivalent to Field Marshal. The SS was now a state within the state, and 2 years later, on June 17, 1936, Hitler made it official. Himmler became chief of the German police and a state secretary in the Interior Ministry, giving him control of every single police and security force in Germany. No one had done this before. No single individual had ever controlled the entirety of Germany's security apparatus, and Himmler had done it in 3 years. Dachau and the architecture of terror. 1 month after the Nazis came to power, in March 1933, Himmler established the first official concentration camp at Dachau, outside Munich. Hitler had been clear, he didn't want it to function like an ordinary prison. He wanted something else. What Himmler built at Dachau became the template for every camp that followed. He appointed Theodor Eicke, a convicted felon and devoted Nazi, to run the camp in June 1933. Eicke devised the system, complete isolation from the outside world, exhausting work details, elaborate roll calls, brutal punishment for any infraction, total psychological domination of prisoners by guards. The guards wore a special insignia, the Totenkopf, the death's head, a symbol Himmler invested with deep, almost religious meaning. Death's head rings were issued to SS officers and were never to be sold. Upon the owner's death, they were to be returned to Himmler personally. By the outbreak of World War II, there were 6 main concentration camps housing approximately 27,000 inmates. These early camps held political opponents, asocials, criminals, and Jews. But Himmler's system was designed to expand, and expand it did. Operation Barbarossa and the decision to murder a continent. The invasion of the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, marked a turning point, not just in the war, but in the history of organized mass murder. The day before the invasion began, Himmler commissioned the drafting of General Plan Ost, the general plan for the East. Approved by Hitler in May 1942, the plan envisioned the conquest and ethnic cleansing of the Baltic states, Poland, Western Ukraine, and Belarus. The existing populations, approximately 31 million people, would be expelled eastward, worked to death as slave labor, or simply starved. 10 million ethnic Germans would then be settled in their place. Himmler calculated it would take 20 to 30 years to implement, at a cost of 67 billion Reichsmarks. He spoke openly about it. It is a question of existence. Thus it will be a racial struggle of pitiless severity, in the course of which 20 to 30 million Slavs and Jews will perish. He wasn't speaking hypothetically. Following the German army into the Soviet Union were the Einsatzgruppen, mobile SS killing units originally formed to secure government documents in occupied territories. They had been repurposed. Their new mission was mass murder. Within 8 months of the invasion, 2.8 million Soviet prisoners of war had died of starvation and mistreatment. The Einsatzgruppen moved from town to town, rounding up Jewish communities, marching them to the edges of forests and ravines, and shooting them. At Babi Yar, in Ukraine, 33,771 Jews were shot in just 2 days, in late September 1941. In August 1941, Himmler attended a mass shooting of 100 Jews in Minsk. It was the first time he had witnessed an execution. He nearly fainted. When a victim's brains splattered onto his coat, he went pale, staggered, and had to be steadied by an aide. He was deeply disturbed, not by the killing itself, but by the psychological toll it was taking on his men. He decided more efficient methods were needed. The final solution: industrialized murder. In January 1942, at a villa on the shores of Lake Wannsee in Berlin, 15 senior Nazi officials gathered for a meeting organized by Reinhard Heydrich. The Wannsee Conference, as it became known, was not where the decision to murder Europe's Jews was made. That decision had already been made by Hitler and Himmler. Wannsee was where the logistics were worked out. Heydrich presented the plan. Jews capable of work would be worked to death. Those who couldn't work would be killed outright. The target: 11 million Jews across Europe. Hitler had placed Himmler in overall charge. The result was an unprecedented industrial killing program. Himmler ordered the construction of 3 dedicated extermination camps at Belzec, Sobibor and Treblinka as part of Operation Reinhard, named in honor of Heydrich after his assassination in June 1942. He ordered the massive expansion of Auschwitz, including the construction of gas chambers using Zyklon B pesticide. He visited Auschwitz personally on July 17th to 18th, 1942, and watched a demonstration gassing. He toured the construction site. He approved everything. By the end of the war, at least 5.5 million Jews had been murdered by the Nazi regime. Most estimates place the figure at 6 million. Millions of others died alongside them. Soviet POWs, Polish civilians, Roma, political prisoners, disabled people, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses. Himmler never hid from what he was doing, at least not within the party. On October 4th, 1943, in a secret speech to senior SS officers in Poznan, he addressed the Holocaust directly. He called it a page of glory that would never be written into history. He told his audience, "Most of you will know what it means when 100 corpses lie side by side, or 500 or 1,000. To have endured this, and at the same time to have remained decent, this has made us tough." He genuinely believed that murdering millions of people was an act of moral courage. The mysticism behind the machinery. It would be a mistake to understand Himmler purely as a cold-blooded administrator. He was also genuinely and deeply a mystic, and his mysticism was inseparable from his ideology. From his early 20s, Himmler had been fascinated by Germanic mythology, occult traditions, and the idea of racial memory stretching back through millennia of Aryan history. He modelled the SS on the Teutonic Knights, medieval warrior monks who combined military discipline with religious devotion. In 1935, he founded the Ahnenerbe, a pseudo-academic research society that sent expeditions across the globe searching for evidence of ancient Aryan civilization. They went to Tibet. They explored prehistoric sites in Europe. They collected skulls for racial measurement. He replaced Christian rituals within the SS with new invented ceremonies tied to the solstices and the seasons. SS naming ceremonies replaced baptisms. New funeral rites were created. Death's head rings were invested with almost sacred significance. He sought to engineer, through selective breeding and cultural indoctrination, a new race of Germanic supermen who would rule his conquered Eastern Empire for 1,000 years. Hitler found all of this ridiculous. He privately called Himmler's mystical obsessions nonsense, but he never stopped him, because the results Himmler delivered were exactly what Hitler wanted. The military disaster. By 1944, Himmler had accumulated more power than perhaps any individual in German history, controlling the SS, the entire police apparatus, the concentration camp system, the intelligence services, the Waffen-SS with its 35 divisions, and the Interior Ministry. After the failed assassination attempt on Hitler on July 20, 1944, he also became commander of the replacement army, 2 million men. And then Hitler made one final disastrous appointment. In January 1945, with Soviet forces driving deep into Germany, Hitler named Himmler commander of Army Group Vistula, tasked with halting the Red Army's advance into Pomerania. The German General Staff was appalled. Himmler had no military experience whatsoever. His performance confirmed their fears. He set up his headquarters on his private train, which had one telephone line, inadequate maps, and no radio equipment to relay orders. He worked 4 hours a day, required a massage before starting, and took a long nap after lunch. He rarely left the train. When General Heinz Guderian demanded he commit to a specific date for a counter-offensive, Himmler stalled and evaded. When the offensive finally launched in February 1945, it collapsed in rain and mud within days. By March 20th, Hitler replaced him. Himmler, the second most powerful man in Germany, fled to a sanatorium. The betrayal, the disguise, and the cyanide pill. By April 1945, Germany was finished, and Himmler knew it. He began secret negotiations with Count Volker Bernadotte, head of the Swedish Red Cross, hoping to arrange a German surrender to the Western Allies, excluding the Soviets, while presenting himself as the man who could restore order. He met Hitler one final time on April 20th, 1945, Hitler's birthday, and swore undying loyalty. Then he left Berlin and never returned. On April 23rd, Himmler met Bernadotte at the Swedish consulate in Lübeck, presenting himself as Germany's acting leader, claiming Hitler would be dead within days, and requesting that Eisenhower accept a German surrender in the West. Bernadotte took the proposal, but passed it on to the Allies, who rejected it. On April the 28th, the BBC broadcast the news of Himmler's secret negotiations. Hitler, who had called Himmler der treue Heinrich, the faithful Heinrich, for years, erupted in rage. He declared Himmler a traitor, stripped him of every office he held, expelled him from the Nazi Party, and ordered his arrest. In his last will and testament, written the following day, Hitler named both Himmler and Göring as traitors to Germany. Himmler attempted to disappear. He shaved his mustache. He removed his glasses. He obtained forged papers in the name of Sergeant Heinrich Himmler, a dead man whose identity papers bore a stamp that British intelligence already knew to look for. On May 21st, he and 2 aides were stopped at a checkpoint near Bremerwörde, run by former Soviet POWs. He was detained and transferred through several camps before arriving at the British 31st Civilian Interrogation Camp near Lüneburg on May 23rd. When a doctor attempted to examine his mouth, Himmler jerked his head away. Then he bit down on a potassium cyanide capsule he had been concealing. He was dead within 15 minutes. He was buried in an unmarked grave near Lüneburg. Its location has never been revealed. What he left behind. The numbers are almost incomprehensible. Under Himmler's direct authority, at least 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust. Approximately 14 million people killed across Eastern Europe through the implementation of General Plan Osten, 2.8 million Soviet POWs dead in 8 months. Approximately 175,000 Volkssturm members, some as young as 14, killed in the final months of the war. Around 2 million prisoners murdered in the concentration camp system alone. Himmler's daughter Gudrun, whom he called Puppy, Dolly, remained devoted to her father's memory for the rest of her life. She worked for West German intelligence in the early 1960s and became a prominent figure in far-right circles dedicated to rehabilitating the reputation of former SS members. Historians have consistently placed Himmler among the most powerful and dangerous individuals in the history of the modern state. He was not a genius. He was not particularly charismatic. He was a deeply mediocre man with an extraordinary capacity for organization, an absolute absence of moral constraint, and a total willingness to carry out the most extreme ideology to its most extreme conclusion. He built the bureaucracy of mass murder. He staffed it, funded it, expanded it, and defended it with genuine conviction that he was doing something noble. That, perhaps more than anything else, is what makes Heinrich Himmler so important to understand, and so deeply, enduringly disturbing. The banality of evil has rarely worn such a thoroughly unremarkable face.